But I realized that people's opinion about abortion is going to be based on what their worldview is. And the question ultimately comes back to worldview. And I don't know how effective we were at addressing that issue. And so I started going out on campus with one of my pastors, and then I started hearing words I hadn't heard before when I was doing evangelism, words like multiverse or teleological or things like that. And I realized it was a whole different game on the campuses. And one day we were out trying to share with students, and there was a really radical street evangelist kind of guy preaching and offending people. And it wasn't going over very well. And I remember walking away, and I saw Eric, and he was standing at his table, and he was addressing people in a really calm, rational manner. And he just looked so normal. And I went up and was able to meet him. And since that time, he's kind of introduced me into a whole new world of just learning how to defend our faith from a historical, scientific, and philosophical aspect, and really seeing the need for pre-evangelism on the campus to bring down barriers that people might set up as blockades to why they can't really listen to the gospel. And it's just been a wonderful growth curve. And I just always think of J.P. Moreland, though, who says, we don't learn apologetics mostly to win the atheist, but when times of temptation or unanswered prayer come, we can stand firm. And that has proven true as I've gone through periods of discouragement. Just knowing that what I know is the truth has really been foundational for me and helped me get through some hard times.
Right, and that's the other thing. It's not like apologetics. Some people think it's about I have all the answers and that I can win the person to answer all the objections, and the person will believe. That obviously nobody who does apologetics, even Doug would tell you this, that nobody believes anyone come to faith without the work of the Holy Spirit. But the gospel is sharing the good news and leaving the results to God. But when people have barriers to the gospel, that's when you need apologetics. If someone says, I don't believe God exists, I don't believe miracles are possible, I don't trust the New Testament, now you've got a problem. You can't just give people the gospel. I mean, you can give it to them, but if they don't believe there's a God who speaks into history and they don't believe miracles are possible, then now you're going backwards. It's like, well, where do I go then? You know what I mean? And that's just the reality of our culture. I mean, and now let me speak about Jewish people, by the way, and there's people on here like Vi and others that have had experience with this. A lot of Jewish people are very secular these days. They don't even believe in God. And so my experience even talking to Jewish people is that they don't even let alone believing in a Messiah. They don't even think there's a God. So, I'm almost always doing apologetics with Jewish people, always trying to talk about the existence of God with them. And so it's really I don't even think you can really do evangelism very effectively today without apologetics. It's if you can go up to someone and present the gospel, like some people are gifted evangelists and they can just do it and people don't have objections and the Holy Spirit cuts through it. I'm not saying that can't happen, and it does happen sometimes, but it's very rare, at least on a college campus. I don't know where you guys are, but who here is seeing tons of people come to faith wherever you are? Give me some interaction. Or who's seen people just come to faith after hearing the gospel one time, or just hearing it, boom, they believe? Has anyone seen? I'm not saying it can't happen, and maybe it does happen where you're at. Who's seen that here out of these 34 people here today? Anybody? Yeah.
Yeah, I know one guy in a home group that I was at, just he heard it and he said, that makes sense. And that was it. He was done.
Okay.
It was that simple.
Okay. How often do you see that? How often have you seen that, though? Very rare.
That's the only time. There was another gal, though, that I witnessed to. I worked with her, and I witnessed to her for years. And I mean, I'm a Xenos graduate here, so apologetics.
I know that.
Yeah, it's like first and foremost. And I mean, I could answer every question I went through, and it went nowhere. Well, then it was 10 years later, after we went separate ways, that her father passed away, and she asked her mother, "How are you holding up through all this?" And she says, "It's not me, it's Christ in me." And this girl told me, everything that you had ever said to me come rushing back. And she said, I was just flooded with things. And she said, I became a believer on the spot.
Huh. That's great. Anybody else seen a lot of people come to faith where you're at without giving any good reasons or argumentation or apologetics? Anybody?
Oh, yeah. I've seen Barry.
Well, Barry did. Yeah, Barry was definitely one of those gifted evangelists that he didn't need much.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen it many times with him.
Right. Some people can do that. I mean, but like I said, that's very rare, I think. And but not on a campus, it's very difficult, especially on a college campus. Right. Anybody else seen tons of people?
Yeah, Eric, I was going to say that, but you just qualified what you were saying. I think in your world, like in the college campus world, the world I'm about to go into, apologetics is absolutely necessary. But I've done prison ministry and street ministry a lot. And in that world, for people, I mean, let's be honest, one of the main reasons people are in jail probably is because they've not put a lot of thought into anything they're doing. And that's why they're in where they are,
Right.
So doing prison ministry and things like that, I've seen multitudes come to Jesus in one service, like up as high as 20 or 30 sometimes, just giving one gospel presentation. But it's always interesting to me, though, after they get saved and you come back the next week, then they've got the questions for apologetics. Then they're wondering, now they're thinking about God, they're like, well, who created him? And,
right.
and that kind of, so yeah, it's like even before and after, I think it's, even if you lead somebody to Christ, first time you ever talk to them, you still got to bring apologetics into it at some point to disciple them. So.
Yeah, well, like I said, a lot of times it helps you in your own faith be stronger and be more rooted. It's not just about answering someone who doesn't believe. You know what I mean? It's about answering your own questions so you can be more rooted in what you believe. So it serves the insider, the in-reach, and the outreach, both. Tom, do you want to say something? You're on the screen.
Yes, add 6 people to your head count. There are 7 of us gathered here in Eastern Kentucky.
Okay.
2 of us attend the Messianic Fellowship.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay. Okay. Well, the first believers that followed Jesus, they did a lot of apologetics when they preached the gospel in the book of Acts. Basically, the way they led people to faith was through messianic prophecy and the resurrection. If you read the book of Acts, there's like 0 personal testimonies. Hardly any. Like where someone just goes in and gives their testimony. Not against it, I'm just saying that it's interesting, that the way they led people to faith in book of Acts is they're using a lot of apologetic preaching. So let me say this. Let me ask a question. Some people come to me and they say, I can't learn everything about apologetics. I can't learn everything. I can't be like Douglas Groothuis or J.P. Moreland or William Lane Craig or Ravi Zacharias. So where do I start? Well, I always tell people that there's about 5 things I would say you need to know in order to be effective in this culture. There's about 5 areas that you definitely need to be able to at least have your dip into somewhat. And the first one would be to explain the existence of God without using the Bible. If you want to talk to people in this culture about the God question, you're going to have some good reasons for believing in God without simply using the Bible. Now, some people would say, well, that's just impossible because the Bible's what converts people. The Bible's what leads people to faith. The Bible's, the thing that convicts them. Well, that's true, but, God gives, there's evidence for God without using the Bible in the natural world, right? And so you need to be able to have some good reasons for explaining God exists, in the realm of the natural world, like I said, without using the Bible. Now, then you can go into the Bible if you want. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that if someone doesn't accept the authority of the Bible, you're going to have some good reasons for God without using the Bible. That's very hard for some Christians. I mean, all they've been taught is the scriptures, which is, we preach every Sunday in churches, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with the scriptures. I'm just saying that, if you don't have any design arguments or arguments from existence, or arguments for, what we call teleological arguments, or just the argument from mind, or the argument from causality, or just all kinds of arguments out there you could use for God without using the Bible, just starting out. And then the second thing that would lead me in to say that you need to be able to articulate the resurrection. You need good reasons for believing Jesus rose from the dead. I would say if you cannot explain that to people, like you have good argumentation, that you're going to have a hard time, because that's the big thing about our faith. Obviously Jesus rose. That would definitely be a huge area that you need to have some good training in apologetics or good answers. The third area would definitely be religious pluralism. Explaining why Jesus is the only way to God in light of like Islam and all these other religions that are out there. That's one I think people definitely need to be able to have a handle on. Fourth issue would be the problem of evil, the problem of suffering. That issue, that would be something you need, I think, some good equipping on. And then finally, I'd probably say probably the morality, like the moral argument, like explaining like why, why our morality based in God's existence makes more sense without God, because people make moral judgments all the time in their lives. So those are some areas I would say you definitely would need some equipping in. Oh, and be able to explain, obviously, the Bible, why you think it's reliable. That's for sure. That'd be another one. Brad, are you on here? Brad? Is Brad on here? No, Brad. He disappeared. I'm trying to find someone else from our group on here today. Who else is on here from Ohio State? Anybody here? Mitchell.
I'm here.
There you are, Mitchell. Okay. Well, let me ask Mitchell a question. I'll put him on the spot. Since Mitchell was our student president at Ohio State, he just graduated. He's going off to grad school. So, Mitchell, what got you? You're an undergrad, and everything. You just finished up. What was your take on being you became a Christian kind of later on, I know, as you got in the university setting, right, the beginning. So what was it that got you interested in apologetics, and where do you think your culture, like your age group, is at with like questions and thinking about these issues? Like, do you think it's needed? Do you think that's the issue with people? They have a lot of objections. Do you think it's other issues? Like, how'd you get involved with it, and where do you think people are at from your experience?
Let's see.
Put you on the spot.
How I got involved in it was I went to Awaken Bible study one time. It's a campus Bible study at OSU, and someone there must have told me about Ratio Christi, and I showed up there one time. I don't remember why I came or who told me. Maybe it was Jeremiah. Anyway, I showed up there one time at Ratio Christi, and eventually I started coming back. I don't know. It was something like that.
Okay, all right. Would you say people your age group that you dealt with on your undergrad degree, since you just finished, had a lot of questions about the God question? Or you think they're mostly apathetic, or you think they all had plenty of questions, most from your experience, or just a mixed bag?
It's certainly a mixed bag in the sense that OSU, I think, is so big that if you can think of any belief, then someone at OSU probably has it. But I would say, because it's just such a big campus, but I would say in general, I'd say most people are, well, I don't know, it's hard to generalize, but I'd say many people I know certainly are probably apathetic about the whole issue and think that they have their mind made up already. I'd say it's very, in general in academia, it's a very, for many fields at least, for many scholars, for many students, it's kind of like a foregone conclusion that some sort of atheistic worldview is correct. Whether they say that explicitly or not.
Okay, and what do you think about the Christians that you encountered when you were in undergrad? You went to a lot of different groups. Do you think they're kind of apathetic towards learning how to defend their faith and give good reasons for what they believe? Or do you think that some of them are like, yeah, I really do want to figure out why I believe what I believe?
I would say that most Christian students on campus that I've met don't really have a really great interest in apologetics, like in the sense that they're like apologetics nerds or something like that. But I would say that everyone that I've met has some interest in knowing on a basic level whether or not what they believe is true and accurate and things like that. And everyone I've met on some level wants to know how to more convincingly share their faith and answer difficult questions and things like that. So there's definitely, I'd say people are interested in it, but not to the extent that they'd want to join an apologetics club or something like that.
Do you think that some part of the issue is some people are not that interested because they're just not sharing their faith and being challenged in their faith, therefore they don't need to learn it? Do you think that's
Yeah,
part of the reason?
that's possible for some people. Possible for some people, but I'd say it's different for every person. Yeah, I think especially for students, we have so much work to do. It's kind of hard to think about non-school related things sometimes, at least in my experience.
Right, when you're trying to get your undergrad degree and you've got exams and trying to work a job, and it's just so much, it's almost
Yeah.
overwhelming, right?
Yeah, but like I said, every person is going to have a different experience with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Anybody else on here from our chapter? I'm trying to let Charles, you're here.
I'm here.
Tom, yay, Tom's a goodie. Okay, so Tom, do tell us. Tom was really interested. I met Tom when he was a freshman. He just graduated as well, but he's got a good interest in apologetics. So you give me your take on the whole thing. The questions I just asked Mitchell. He just graduated from Ohio State. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'd say in general, what I've come to realize at Ohio State, at least from hearing about why exactly people leave the faith, I think a lot of it really is more related to politics than it is to actual issues of, the reliability of the Gospels or arguments for God's existence. And I say this primarily because that's the interactions I've had with people, and because I was reading a study recently that said that college students are more likely to abandon the faith not when they go to science classes in college and not when they go to mathematics or anything like that, but the things that are more likely to lead them to abandon the faith are studying the humanities and going out and partying a lot. So I think there's a lot of ripe environmental things that sort of can lead to it. Um, and as for the Christian communities I've been in around campus, I'd say really it's in short supplies. I'm Catholic, and I was a big part of the Catholic group on campus. And occasionally they would have one meeting on apologetics or something like that. But really, nobody really wanted to talk about it a lot. People were more concerned with having themselves grow spiritually. And I mean, it seemed to me as if most of the people, if I were to bring up an issue that could be addressed by apologetics, my impression is that most of the most religious people I knew would not know how to respond. So I would say it's definitely needed now more than ever on college campuses.
Okay. Do you think that you say politics is one of the big reasons people are leaving the faith, or they lean towards agnosticism or atheism? Can you expand on that? What is it? Just
Absolutely,
because
yeah.
it's secularism issue, or what?
Yeah, so when I say politics is actually not really the right word for it. Um, I'll call it more non-material issues, as in things that are not really important to whether or not Christianity is true. So for instance, one of the big controversies recently is the deconversion of Rhett and Link.
Right.
And in their deconversion story, one of the things they talk about is how they, grew up very devout Christians, but then like they met a gay guy, and this caused a crisis of faith. And I just said to myself, like, well, I hear stories like that all the time. Like, well, I was a Christian, but then the whole issue of homosexuality in the church really ended up driving my faith away from me. And a lot of it doesn't make sense, but there's a lot of this animosity. I think because of that. I think because of the fact that Christianity condemns a lot of the behavior that college students like to engage in. The college students are more inclined to say, well, that doesn't seem quite right to me. So, this thing comes first, so I'm gonna just abandon Christianity or something along those lines. And then there's other political issues that can be a cause. But of course, there's when I say that people study the humanities, and then they're more inclined to leave the faith. One of the things we talk about is how saturated the humanities are with postmodernism and critical theory, which are, completely opposed to the idea of there being any objective truth, to there being any objective morality. And, it's really a whole artistic sphere that I think is at odds with Christianity. So I like what Mitchell said, that, it's kind of a foregone conclusion in a lot of academia that, some kind of atheistic worldview is correct. I think, honestly, that's really hammered a lot more in the humanities than it would be in, basic science. I mean, in science, you're learning, things that are, you're just kind of being given the data, whereas you go to the humanities, they're telling you more what to think rather than how to think.
Right. Okay. Those are good points. I agree 100%.
Don't the humanists talk to the scientists?
Do the humanists talk to the scientists?
Yeah.
Well, at Ohio State, we have a secular humanist group there, like a secular group. They're called, God, Mitchell, what's their name again? They changed it.
Secular Student Alliance.
Secular Student Alliance. They're at the campus, but I wouldn't say they're that involved as far as they're not causing that big of an influence on the campus. I mean,
I could have thought your first point, the existence of God without mentioning the Bible, I would have thought you would approach that through the sciences.
Oh,
now that the findings seem to imply that matter, energy, space, and time all had a beginning.
Yeah.
The question, where did everything come from?
Well,
Especially
yeah.
the fact that the sciences only deal with matter, energy, space, and time. Therefore,
Okay.
no?
Yeah, let me address that. So when it comes to science, on our campus, we've had we do events. We do big events every year, a couple big events a year on top of our evangelism and our regular meetings, and we bring in speakers. I've had 3 scientists at the campus, I think, over the years. I had Paul Nelson, who has a doctorate in philosophical or relation. He did something like relation to philosophy and biology or something. He did a lecture on biology years ago. Then I had Michael Strauss come. Michael Strauss is a physicist. He teaches at University of Oklahoma. He did a lecture on the existence of the universe, like you're talking about, cosmology, fine-tuning, stuff like that. And then last year we had James Tour. James Tour is one of the most well-known chemists, organic chemists in the world. He's in charge of the chemistry department at Rice University. So we have had scientific speakers come and speak on the existence of God, how it relates to science. And, I'll tell you what, out of all my experience of all the events we've done, do you know that probably there's less interest in those than our other events? Do you know that? Isn't that interesting? Meaning that if we bring in a popular level speaker to our campus, like Frank Turek, who does I Have Faith to Be an Atheist, we'll have easily 500 to 600 people there, no problem. I bring in a science speaker, we have maybe 100 to 200 people. See what I'm saying? So it's interesting that as much as everyone gripes about how big science is and how important it's good to give scientific evidence, which you should, I'm not against it. It really, for some students, it doesn't seem to be as a huge, as big as it should be. It doesn't appear to be as big as an issue as it should be.
Because I'd have thought science was a way to get in on your first point.
No, it is. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying when we bring in speakers, that's what they do. They bring up good evidence for God without using the Bible, like James Tour talked about evidence for God in chemistry, and Michael Strauss talked about evidence for God in physics. So yeah, we've done that. I agree with that. You should do that. I'm just saying that it's not always easy to, it's interesting, people sometimes, they just don't always gravitate towards that. It just depends. I'll keep doing it. I'm just saying it just depends on the individual and who they are. So it's a mixed bag with people, where they're at. I'm just saying, in my experiences, you really should have some good reasons for God's existence without using the Bible. Who else wants to agree with me on that? Has anyone ever tried to talk about God with using the Bible? Someone you had to go outside the Bible? Who here has had to do that? Come on. Anyone here had to do that?
It seems like almost always, it seems like that's where my conversations hit lately. And by lately, I mean last 3 years. Because because I started off with presuppositional apologetics. That was my introduction, and I realized real quick that when I heard C.S. Lewis say what he said, and I can't quote it verbatim, but somebody had to convince him of what was it, Eric? You might be able to say off the top of your head. He had to be convinced of paganism before he could be convinced of Christianity, and that's often been my experience. I wanted to ask you, Eric, as an experienced Ratio Christi ministry leader on campus, what do you feel like is, over the last however many years you've been doing it now, what do you feel like is the burning question for students in America right now, or at Ohio State, I guess? Like, what do you think is the thing that people struggle with most?
I'll give my take on it, and then I'll punt a couple other people, maybe some other people like from our campus. I don't know if I can say it's one thing. I would say what I'm seeing a lot of the, someone needs to mute. Okay, there we go. I would say for some people, it seems to be they're leaning more towards the issues of social justice issues. They seem to be very concerned about those issues, like, rights, equality, justice, oppression, things like that. Some of the things Neil addressed a little bit in his talk. And the biggest thing that I'm concerned about is they don't seem to be seeing the issue of whether what we believe is true. They don't seem to be concerned or as really worried about whether what we believe is actually true. And so they think because they can stay busy or be involved with something else that, well, maybe it is true what Eric's saying is true, or what Tom's saying is true, that God exists and Jesus is the Son of God, but it's really not a huge issue for me. And, I can go out and do whatever I want and just pursue these other things. And so I'm seeing a little bit of what I would say I've seen more of a pragmatic culture, meaning that people are believing things that simply work for them. Meaning they don't really care much if it's true. They just care if it makes a difference in their lives. It works for them functionally. So they could believe in this and it makes a difference. It helps them, or believe in this and this makes a difference. But that belief may not even be true, right? For example, like you could be a Mormon, right? You could say Mormonism works for me. It helps me in my life. I don't think there's any good evidence for Mormonism, and I'm not going to be a Mormon because I don't think it matches reality. So I don't care how much it works for you, makes a difference. I'm not going to believe it because I don't think it's true. See what I mean? So yeah, and so that's a lot of what I see. A lot of emphasis on pragmatism out there, just looking for things of pragmatic benefit. I don't know, Carla, would you agree with that? Carla's gone.
No,
Okay.
I'm here. Yeah, there does seem to be some apathy as far as does truth exist, and I think maybe because they're in, well, like Mitchell was saying, they're so busy, a pretty big commitment to get their degree. Maybe the big questions are on the back burner at the moment. I'm not sure.
Right. Tom, are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay, so you just pretty much already summed up what you said. You think politics and that stuff is the issue, the moral issues, right? The big moral issues on people's minds, right? The social justice issues.
Yeah, I definitely think that people sort of succumb to a lot of what their emotional impulses say on these issues, and then when people press them on that, rather than abandoning their sort of emotionally formed beliefs about certain issues, they just decide to abandon the faith. And maybe part of that is not being, well versed in why they believe in the first place. So really, when it comes to the faith, I think a lot of the time those people don't have firm foundations to begin with. So, when something comes into very harsh conflict with the faith, they're pretty satisfied with abandoning the faith.
Bill, I would say mostly for me, it's just a lot of pragmatism. That what I see. You know what I mean? But you know what I mean by that, right? Bill, you there? Yeah, you. Can you hear me? You got to unmute. Anyway, okay. I don't know what happened.
So you said something important about knowing reality. about pragmatism and reality. What the other people are saying seems to imply that in the university now people are not really interested in reality, just in what makes them feel good.
Well, what I mean by that is that they're not really asking whether what they believe is based in reality, right? So if you make a truth claim that I'm a Mormon or I'm a Muslim or I'm an atheist, you're basically saying that what you believe, your belief system matches what you think it matches reality. Like it makes sense of reality to me. Now, a lot of atheists would say, well, maybe I don't have a worldview. Atheism isn't a worldview. They might say that. I think it is a worldview, but they might say it's not. Yeah. But the point is that they could make those claims and it may help them in life and may help them be happy and be a fulfilled person and be a good father. Like I had a Muslim say to me once, Islam's made me a better father, a better husband, more responsible. Well, that doesn't really, that's fine, but it doesn't really mean that your central core of your belief matches reality just because it helps you in some way. I mean, I could believe all kinds of things that people say, wow, he's really nice and he's responsible. What does he believe? Well, he's a Mormon. Does that mean Mormonism's true just because it makes me responsible and makes me a good husband? I mean, there isn't any evidence in the Book of Mormon, zero. So, you know what I mean? That's what I'm trying to say. So try to say, I'm not sure a lot of people are thinking about whether their truth claims are matching reality, and they're just more concerned whether they work pragmatically.
I think this fits in with the fourth point you made about the problem of evil. They need to, once pain comes in and they start facing reality about pain, that will change their way of thinking. It's like C.S. Lewis said, pain is when God speaks with a trumpet.
Right, it can happen. That can get their attention, but depends what they gravitate to. They could still gravitate to a different religion or something, you know, they're going to grab onto something. Someone else said something. Does someone else jump in here?
Oh, sorry.
That's
I was
okay.
just trying to tell you that I can definitely affirm that just because I recently, you know, I've been kind of having about a month worth of just kind of like text evangelizing with a Mormon friend of mine. And she seems to really value the emotional experience of that there is a God and that this is how it is and that you feel the sense of peace and that you know that's from the Holy Spirit. And I know that one of the things that I asked her, I was like, well, let's just say that I'm a Muslim and I feel peace from Allah. Like, does that mean that God is true? And the interesting thing is that she seemed to suggest that she thought that Allah was the same God as the God they believe in. And I was just like, where do you get that idea? Like, Allah and the God of Mormonism are so different. Like, it's a huge, like, change.
Yes.
Yeah. The other issue we have is the internet is a huge issue these days. You know, people just getting so much information on the internet, right? And so that creates a big challenge for us in our evangelism because you try to talk to somebody, they've read something online, and then you got to work through that. You know what I mean? And so the internet's played a huge role and why apologetics is needed so much more than ever. I don't know how to express it. I mean, I'll be witnessing to people, and literally they'll just go right on their phone in front of me. Let me look that up. You know what I mean? They'll just type it in and look it up on Wikipedia. Oh, it said Jesus didn't exist. You know, oh, okay, well, that settles that. You know, I looked it up on Wikipedia. So the internet's become a huge issue these days. Okay, so let me ask you a question. So who here has tried to look for apologetics within their churches, but can't seem to get it anywhere within their own churches? Is anyone having that problem? There's one. Who else wants to raise their hand? Anymore? Yeah, I'll take some takers. Sam, go ahead.
Well, actually, I offered it to the church I used to be with.
Offered to teach it?
Yes.
God bless you. And what happened?
But they said most of the evangelistic work is not through reasoning and apologetic. It's through people who in need, say like lonely, wanting to have fellowship. Which is true. Most of the people I talk to, why you join our church? Because there's some nice people here. I want to be part of it. It's nothing to do with objective truth. So he said it's not needed.
It's felt needs. It's based on felt needs, right?
Yes.
Felt needs. Okay.
So he said that class is basically a waste of time. Just learn
Okay.
how to love people and invite them to church and give them a nice, beautiful, loving Jesus. That's all you need.
Okay, so there's an issue where he thought you were saying apologetics is only because of evangelistic issues. I think you maybe were saying apologetics is needed for discipleship too. It's part of discipleship, right?
Basically, said it's
Right.
love, cover everything. You don't need. Actually, I say, well, the other thing is learn how to read the Bible. They said it's also unnecessary. It's all you need is love Jesus. That's all you need to do. Just cover everything. So basically, they're biblically illiterate and apologetic ignorant.
Yeah,
but they're very happy with it. They don't want anything beyond that.
How can they know? How can they love Jesus if they don't know what he's like?
Well, just look at all the Hallmark cards, you'll get it all.
The Hallmark cards?
Yeah.
No, you mean the Christmas Hallmark cards, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Whatever. Okay, well, yeah, that's the thing is that, you know, sometimes they don't understand. A lot of it has to do with just wanting to get more discipleship. It's part of discipleship.
Yeah.
So anybody else had a challenge of trying to?
Oh, years ago, I mean, Barry and I were in a church where we realized that, you know, people who have been believers for many years really couldn't defend their faith.
Right.
So we went to the
Right.
pastor, and we had a real burden for discipleship, and he gave us the go ahead. It was a structured discipleship program from Genesis. It dealt with doctrine, and from Genesis to Revelation. So Barry took a group of men joined him, and a group of women joined me, and I think that was the outgrowth maybe of apologetics. I had a Jewish woman who approached me and said, could she join my group? And I said, yeah. And just being in the Word, and that she was just totally amazed. She slapped her forehead and she says, my God, why haven't the rabbis told us these things? And she prayed to receive the Lord with me.
Yeah, you mean she hadn't read the scriptures, you mean in the
Right.
the way, yeah.
Right. And they just, you know, yeah. But I think it is. I think many believers are just lukewarm when they come, and you know what God says about that. I'll spew you out of my mouth. I mean, because they really haven't been rooted and discipled and able to defend their faith.
We also have to be challenged a bit. I think just a lot of times maybe we're not really challenged. I mean, I only got into apologetics because I got challenged very early by people. Almost everybody I talked to had questions or objections, and they were challenging me just nonstop. I mean, of course, all my Jewish friends growing up didn't believe in God, most of them. So, you know, a lot of times I was hearing atheist objections, and then even other people. I just had so many objections. I was like, good grief. I'm like, I had no idea these many people just, I thought everyone would want to believe this. Who would want to have a relationship with God? Well, I was dead wrong, you know, as far as the people I was encountering. And then you get to the university, it's a whole different ballgame. I mean, if you're not equipped in some way, I mean, you're going to be thrown, you don't know what you're going to hear on a daily basis. I mean, it's just, yeah.
Jewish missions, then we have this other whole group, Jewish objections to the gospel.
Right. And that's why Michael Brown wrote his 5-volume set. You know, you've got a whole Messianic apologetics. That's a whole other field in itself. I mean, so Islamic apologetics to atheists, apologetics to Jewish people, apologetics in general. But the point is that I want to emphasize is that many people are opposed to it because they think, this is what I've heard over the years, that, well, the Holy Spirit has to open their heart. It's like, yes, I know that. It's like, I understand that. I understand that 100%. I don't need to be told that over and over. It's like, that's basic as can be. But it doesn't mean the Holy Spirit isn't going to use your apologetic argument to remove a barrier out of the way so they can see the gospel clearly. You know what I mean? If you give them, I can tell you stories of people. Douglas Groothuis could tell you. He's gotten letters, and people have read his books, and other people, J.P. Moreland, Michael Brown, William Lane Craig, other people, you know, where they say, you know, I read your book and it really helped answer a lot of questions for me. I just never understood this, and now I'm a believer. You know what I mean? I just always had these objections, you know, I just never really could work through them. Now, granted, some people will never get their objections answered. There's moral issues. They don't want to believe for a moral reason. They don't want to believe for an emotional reason. You know, there's obviously spiritual blindness. I understand all that. But the point is that some people, it will have an impact on. Not everybody, but God will use it with some people, and we just let the Holy Spirit do his work. So we just need to quit worrying about the results and let God do the rest. Now, like I said before, if you're a gifted, if you can just present the gospel in some way and somebody has no objections, that's great. If you can somehow, Barry could do that and other people can't. I can do that every once in a while, but the Holy Spirit may not need a lot of questions answered with this person, but for most people, they have questions. At least about 8 out of 10 people I talk to, they do. But that's a campus for you. I don't know. What do you think, Carla? Do you think you've seen a lot of people with questions?
Well, like I said, it's a barrier, and I was thinking though back what you're talking about a little bit earlier, and I do think that for some of these students, especially the ones that were raised in Christian homes and have left the faith, I think for them to see so much diversity on campus is a stumbling block for the just the narrow road of the gospel. And so if they're not super grounded, I think it's very easy for them to just kind of say, well, maybe this isn't the only way to God, or maybe it works for me, but not for everyone else. And it is sad to see so many kids raised in the church and then they get to campus and look around and start to really question, or maybe even walk away.
Yeah, I think that our ministry is designed, we definitely want people to come to us with their questions. We want them to know that, I've had these questions. I really do have these. I want to be able to go somewhere where I can talk about these things openly. And so we want to be able to be that group for them, that they can come to us with all these things that they're thinking about. We don't have a problem with that. That's what we're there for. We won't turn them away. A lot of times students leave the faith because they just can't get their questions answered. They just give up, or at least they go to their pastor or their congregation. They don't have any answers. Then they just bail out in the faith. It's like, well, I guess nobody cares. Like, I thought people would think about these things. It seems like the church I go to, all they talk about is love, just love people, and that's it. Like Sam said, well, that's not good enough for a lot of people, when they have major questions, that's just not going to cut it. It's like, it's not enough. Not at this day and age, it's not. Love is important, but it's not going to go far enough, not this day and age. And so you got to be ready and tell your people, your congregates, that, what, we believe you're free to ask your questions, and we're here to help you work through them, work through these together as a community. We're not going to turn you away and just say, hey, you must be in sin because you're asking that question. What is wrong with you? That may not be the case. And so sometimes we prejudge them. I know a true story of a student that went to a pastor and said, what do you think about this question? The pastor said to him, he said, let's just get to the bottom of the issue here. What kind of sin do you have in your life that you're hiding right now from me? That's what's behind your questions. That really wasn't what was going on, and so I think we need to be ready to help people and be that open door for them. And the other thing is, I think evangelism these days is a process. I think it's just a much longer process with some people. I think it takes a lot longer to work with people and be patient. And as you know, sometimes you pray for people for a long time and talk to them and dialogue with them, and it just is a long, long process. Does anyone notice that? Long process? Yes?
Eric, I don't think that anybody here would say that they accepted the Lord the first time they heard about him.
I did.
The first time you heard about him?
I'm going to give it the first clear presentation I heard from Howard preaching. That's my congregational leader. Because I was sitting in his congregation hearing Matthew preach. It was about the third week he was preaching on Matthew is when I came to faith. Well,
yeah, but you had to have heard other things before that.
I was raised in a Methodist church. I believed in God. I did not know the gospel, so I was not an atheist. I definitely believed in God, but that's the first time I heard a clear presentation of the good news. So let's put it this way, Michelle, I didn't have a lot of apologetic questions. They only came afterwards. But yeah, you're right. You're right, Michelle. No, most people don't come to faith the first time. I agree. So I agree with you 100%. By the way, Michelle's done tons of evangelism for years. So she's seen all kinds of people come to faith. Would you say it's more of a process these days? You think anything's changed over the years?
I think it's just as much a process years ago as it is today.
Okay, I agree. And do you think people what changes have you seen over the years as far as you've been doing this for years. Have you seen people, they have more questions today, the same questions they had 20 years ago, or is it all just kind of the same?
Well, Jewish people are a little bit more open now to Jesus than they were when I grew up. Let's put it that way.
Right. Yeah, Michelle, tell people real quickly. I don't want to. We'll get judged. Name this testimony tonight. We do go around, name your testimony. But you came to faith in like the 70s, right? We'll go back to the 70s. Yeah.
Right.
And so you, for understanding, you were looking around, and you didn't see many churches really interested in Israel and Jewish people in general. A lot of replacement theology, things like that, and you came to faith through reading. It was one like a prophecy book, right, or something? Wasn't that the case? Yeah. What was it you read or something?
Late Great Planet Earth.
Late Great Planet Earth, right? And that's how that was a big pivotal moment for you, right?
I, along with thousands of other Jewish people.
Right, and that's because that book had a role for Israel in it, right?
That's right.
That's
exactly.
right. Right.
But,
and so would you say there's a lot of secularism in the Jewish community today, more than there used to be, or about the same over the years that you've seen?
I'd say there's more a bend towards observance today than there was back then. There's a trend towards observance, especially in Reform Judaism.
Okay.
I don't know. I just can't make any generalizations.
I don't want to. I'm not trying to overgeneralize. I don't want to do that. I know at Ohio State, I'd say most of the Jewish people we talk to are mostly secular. I mean, I don't run into a lot of observance here. Maybe, I mean, it's there. There's an Orthodox group here. I'm just saying that when I go out and talk to students, it seems like a lot of them are very secular. But I guess you're right. It depends on where you're at, what part of the country and everything. So you can't really generalize too much. Okay. Well, let me ask a question. Who else here has had frustration with, or I'm saying, like, what is it that, where are you getting your apologetics from if you're not getting in your churches? From like just online stuff, or where are you finding it? Like
you, Eric.
Well, I know that, but I mean, everyone else, so you are, because you know me, but who else? You don't get it in your church where you go? You guys go, you were raised Xenos, you got to be getting out.
Oh, I wasn't. He was. Yeah. He was raised Catholic for starters, and you tell because.
Okay, yeah, I know. Okay. Yeah. But anybody else, where are you getting your apologetics at? If you're not getting in your churches?
Books.
Just books, just reading them on your own?
Basically, yeah. Something you were saying earlier on about asking the question, I don't believe in God and these. It's only, I suspect it's a lot depends upon the intensity of the need to know the truth, to know what life is really about. When you're reaching some kind of a crossroads in your life. I know that was the case with me. And I said, God, I don't believe in you, don't believe in Jesus, don't believe in any of this stuff, but I'm desperate. I need to know the truth. And it took me another 3 years of various things before I reading books and then all of a sudden I was reading on the resurrection. I realized it was true. All of a sudden, I thought the evidence is overwhelming. But I'm used to studying history and stuff like that.
But you hit the nail on the head. Everybody comes to faith the same way, meaning they have to be truth seekers. You have to care whether it's true, right?
That is the important point, I think.
And so 90% of the conversations we have with students are, the go-away question I leave them is, if this is really true, would you want to believe it? And remember, if it is true, it's going to be true tomorrow, the next day, the next day, the next day. No matter how busy you get, no matter where you get a job making $100,000 a year as an engineer, it's going to be true tomorrow, the next day, 10 weeks from now. So it's almost like you have to get them to see the need to care about whether it's true, right? Now, the Holy Spirit has to do that. But you're right, you have to be a truth seeker. And that seems to be the challenge today, is to get people to care about truth. But don't you think it's kind of interesting how much people seem to care about the truth in so many other areas? I mean, politics, they're passionate about getting the truth in politics, and they care about truth in other areas of life. They couldn't survive without truth, right? But then when it comes to this question, maybe it's true, maybe I'll think about it some point. You know what I mean? And I think it's because of the autonomy issue, right? It forces them to face their autonomy.
Yeah.
So it's frustrating, but the truth issue is the most important thing. They have to care about that.
But they haven't got a measure to measure truth against, so how can they know it? That's where deciding whether there's a God or not is the first question, the way you put it.
Okay, well, that brings the issue of giving a good argument for God without using the Bible. And if you're going to fight for people in this world, if you're obsessed with fighting for rights and dignity and value of humans, I always say to people, why do people matter anyway? Why do you even matter? I mean, I don't, what worldview grounds human rights, dignity, and value? Tell me how a secular humanist, atheistic worldview grounds that at all. Why do you need to fight for people in that worldview? Well, because we matter, because we say we matter is what we say, because we're human. Well, that's circular. That's a circular argument. Okay, so I want to know what grounds those things and what gives you so much inspiration and passion to fight for people. Why do you matter so much? What? Just look at the virus. We're running around trying to save lives all the time, which we should. It's fine, but boy, we matter a lot now. But on an atheistic worldview, like who said it 2 weeks ago, or Clay Jones said last week, you know, you're in an atheist worldview, you're just going to die in a cosmic heat death anyway, and we're just dust. I mean, in the end of the day, what are you fighting to keep us alive for so much longer than when you're just going to all burn up anyway? So, you know, it's just, you really got to challenge people, think about those areas, you know, like, why does morality matter to you? Why do you care about moral obligations, moral duties, moral values? Why are you obligated to help people? Why are you morally obligated? So all these things come back to a worldview issue. And, you know, you just got to try to challenge people. Sometimes they haven't thought about it. So I find most people are borrowing from our worldview most of the time. They're just borrowing from it. They don't even know it. You know what I mean? They say, I want to make the world a better place. Well, who gets to decide what a better world is? What's a better world? Well, what I say it is. I say a better world is where people are treated with dignity, value, and rights. Well, why? Well, who decides that? Well, this culture does. Well, what about German culture? Maybe they do. Or Swiss culture. And which culture says, which one?
On what basis do they consider Hitler to be wrong?
Right. So you just get into all these issues that people end up, they'll end up beginning to see, like, I can't really ground any of those things without God. I really can't. You can try, but it's going to be based in some level, it's going to fall into pure subjectivity. You know, I mean, we do this question of the day on our campus. We say, why are humans valuable? And some people come up and they say, well, because society says they're valuable. I'm like, well, which society? And they'll say, well, government says they're valuable. Which government? You know what I mean? So it just falls into pure, really opinion. It kind of falls into opinion after a while, right? And so those are the things you have to try to bring to their attention. It's not easy, but you got to, you know, maybe get them to think about it. So let me ask you a question. Who here, what's the biggest question you have that you struggle with apologetically? Who wants to go first? Let's give the big question that you wrestled with and try to go into apologetics to help you with that question. There's only one thing, right? I'm joking. Does anybody have any big question they've been wrestling with, like over the years, like the, you know, is it historical reliability of the Bible? Is it suffering? Is it, which religion's true? How can you say one religion's true? Anybody want to shoot one out there?
I think suffering is really a big one for a lot of people. Disappointment with God. And I just remember when they were asking Larry Shapiro, was that his name? What event had influenced his atheistic worldview? Something like that. And he said someone that he loved very much had died, and just led us to believe that he had probably really prayed as a young boy for someone to not die, and God didn't answer the way he thought. And I think it can really rock a lot of people's faith, even if they have good answers in other areas. Tragedy finds us taken by surprise, and it can prove deadly for some people's faith.
Right. And so does part of that problem stem from the fact that maybe, and I'm just asking, maybe when we lead people to faith, or people come to faith and they believe the gospel, maybe they don't really, we don't set them up with the right expectation of what God's like? Is that part of discipleship, or how's that? Do you think that's part of the problem maybe with people, we do with people? Like they just have the wrong view of God to begin with. They just weren't given a proper understanding.
Yeah, I heard a girl call in today to Pastor's Perspective, and she had a friend who was a new believer for about a year and had come down with the COVID virus. And she was like, why would God allow this to happen to me? And her friend, who was a more mature believer, she's like, I didn't know what to say. And so, you know, Bobby Conway and Pastor Brian were trying to explain, we're not guaranteed like to escape all the consequences of the fall, you know, but these Christian girls honestly had no clue. Why would God let someone that believes in him get the COVID virus?
Right. Well, yeah, that happens with, that's a common question with just all kinds of things.
Could I give an answer?
Sure, Ian, go ahead.
It's partly because God is creating people in his own image. And that means you've got to learn patience and endurance and courage. And these things are painful to learn.
Okay, so you mean like he's conforming us to the image of his son, and that's just part of that process?
Yeah, his son suffered a terrific amount of pain, and why should we? Pain is actually one of the reasons for believing in Christianity. Gives an answer for it.
Is that like the problem of pain, C.S. Lewis's book? Anyway, so I think of the problem.
It's a long time since I read it.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if we have any really. Yeah, I mean, we can try with some answers, but I think a lot of times, like, it's more of an emotional issue. People are hurting, and they don't really. There's no really good philosophical answer for that. You just need to kind of encourage them, and part of it is the fall. Part of it is the fall. People still get sick, obviously, and get deathly sick. But yeah, it's the emotional problem of pain. The physical, the philosophical answers won't help that. Someone's emotionally hurting.
Perhaps I should give you, my background is I was crippled as a little kid, and I was angry with God for decades until I read that state I was telling you about, and then I started reading these books, and it all started to make sense to me then, because I realized something what God was doing. No.
How so? You mean just the whole thing, the worldview began to make sense to you, and the pieces kind of came together?
Yeah, they did.
Okay.
It was through. That's why I'm saying I don't find pain a problem at all. It's just something that once you're used to it, you're not afraid of it.
Okay.
It isn't pleasant, and you run away from it if you can, but it's still, but it no longer frightens you.
Okay. All right.
Because God makes you patient. I'm an old man now, so it's a long time ago.
Okay. Anybody else have a big apologetic question or issue that they've wrestled with, or someone has been wrestling with they know? Any big area? Anybody else? Any comments?
Nothing too different from what others have said, but in general, the problem of evil, is God really good? Is a question I even like come back to every now and then. Just like a month ago, I was reading Deuteronomy, and specifically chapter 28, verse like 63. It is. It's it's kind of a stumbling block for me, honestly. But I just try to choose to believe that like God is good regardless, and I don't know. It's something, and I think a lot of it has to do with like we kind of project the qualities of like our earthly father onto our heavenly father at times. So, and that has something to do with like my own struggles, of course, and I imagine that holds true for others as well.
Yeah, is God good? That's always been a question for a long time. Okay. Anybody else? Seems like the problem of suffering is God good, maybe the big one. Anybody else? I'll tell you what mine is at the end. Go ahead. Who said something?
I did.
Yeah, go ahead.
December 1984, sitting at University of Kentucky, I heard a gentleman named Henry Workington speak, and he had profound words to say, and one of them was dealt with suffering. Quoting him as best I can, nothing comes into our lives which God does not allow, so we might come to know him and to trust him. God allows these things, these pains, because the pleasantries in life don't grow us closer to him, don't draw us to him. It's the hard times that bring us. So God allows us to experience these things as a loving father, a loving parent, allows the child to experience some unpleasantries so that they'll learn what to do, what not to do, what is good, what is bad. And that truth answered a lot of questions I had about it. our Heavenly Father could prevent every accident, stop every disease, but he doesn't, because if he did, then we as very weak and immature children would grow up to be just little wretches, little hellions. And so to me, his vein of thought answered a huge number of the questions. And while I'm up here, I was going to say something a while ago, this is slightly off topic, excuse me for that. It had to do with why young adults lose their faith. There's a book which many of you probably read by Ken Ham and Britt Beamer called Already Gone. And it, in a very way, using statistics, dramatically explains why people who grew up in solid churches, solid families, lose their faith. So I'd urge everyone, if you haven't read that book, to look into it. It's got some interesting answers. Way back earlier, y'all were talking about some things about people losing their faith because of the party atmosphere, the sin, debauchery on college campuses. Many years ago, I was listening to Dr. D. James Kennedy, Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church, the late Dr. Kennedy. And he had been listening at some point to I think a public radio interview of Thomas Huxley's grandson. You know, Huxley was considered Darwin's bulldog. He was the one who promoted Darwin's ideas more than Darwin himself. And so the interviewer asked this gentleman, why did Huxley and the gospel of evolution spread so rapidly in academia back in those days? And the answer he gave, it didn't impact our sexual mores. I thought, wow, that's pretty profound, that if you acknowledge that there was a God of the Bible, then you have to rein in your drives. And if you didn't have to acknowledge that, do what you want. Over and out.
Yeah, well, like I said, I think that some people obviously reject God because of their will. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, I've had people admit that right to my face. You know, I think I've given them pretty good evidence at times, and they admit to me, like, even if it was true, I still won't follow them anyway. I don't want to do it. I don't want to believe it. You know what I mean? So that definitely is an issue with some people. I admit that. But that's out there, no doubt. Yeah. So anybody else, any big apologetic issues like they've wrestled with, or one big area?
Hey, Eric,
yes?
That book by Peter Crave, can you hear me good?
Yeah.
Okay. Making Sense of Suffering. Have you read that?
No, I haven't, but I know what it is.
It was great. They used it for a philosophy textbook at my college. And he said something in there that answered that emotional thing so well. And it's actually helped quite a few people that I've ran into. And for some reason, he didn't think it was a very good answer, but I thought it was very profound. He said, but I'm going to go here for a couple pages. He said, can you think of a story, any story in literature, movies, your favorite Disney movie even, where the hero didn't go through some sort of adversity before they realized who they really were, before they realized what kind of person they could be? And to me, I thought that, because you're right. I mean, I did a thing when I committed to go to do apologetics full time. I'm a pastor of a church plant right now. I've got 2 weeks left there before I move on. But last year, I let our congregation just put in a bunch of questions, and I said I'll make a sermon series over answering those questions. And that question came up because I had a lady in our congregation whose son had committed suicide in her bathroom, and she was dealing with it every day. And I realized that it wasn't about giving a good philosophical answer. It had to answer her. It had to reach her. And that was the thing that really got her, is that she understood that although things will never be the same, they're always going to be different. But God is doing something deeper in her than she could ever imagine. and that's what she anchored her hope in, which ultimately is, I mean, another preacher, a friend of mine, knocked on her door one day to invite her to church, and she said, "Oh no, I go to Bill Scott's church. I'll never go to another one. He actually made sense of what I've been going through for the last, 5 years." And, and it wasn't me, it was Peter Kraft, really just using that. And I think that's almost how you have to answer the suffering question, because it's not like you said, it's not a philosophical problem. It's a emotional problem. But that was worth the entire price of the book, just to read those 2 or 3 pages, I thought.
We actually had Peter Kraft here. He did a debate for us with a atheist chemist on why do humans matter. So it's kind of interesting. He was a philosopher and she was the atheist chemist. So it's just 2 contrasting, views, obviously. I agree, but no, I think it's more of an emotional issue. So I don't think any philosophy is going to be able to answer that thoroughly. Yeah, well, anybody else? Any other big apologetic issues they've been wrestling with? Trying to get answers, they just can't find them. On one area, there's only one thing.
And this is Sam. A lot of time I do it, in a coffee shop. A lot of time, what a Bible is like one of the old literature. How in the world we think it's relevant to us today? The Bible is like several thousand years old, probably irrelevant. I think some of my answer would be, I don't know that fall into any of the apologetic, but I usually say, comparing to the culture at that time, say like the sun and the moon and the star in the ancient Near East, around the whole culture, they are deities. The Bible is the only one that they are created objects. They are not deities, which is correspond with modern science. I say, well, the Bible seems to be far more relevant today, and it does not correspond with the current culture at that time. But where does that come from? Some of those kind of things. I wonder that, some of those things that got people interested in seeing, well, maybe there's some relevance of the Bible. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that we have a tremendous challenge in our world today, trying to take a text that was written to a totally different audience in a totally different language in a totally different time, and trying to show people why this text is an authority to us today and why it matters to us today, like why there's moral. If we want to go to big moral issues, why are we using this text? It was written to a totally different people group, a different time, a different culture. Not to mention, we first have to understand what it meant to them, what the authors meant to them at their time before we make an application to ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's where people struggle. They just want to, what's it mean to me? And sometimes that's where it gets us into trouble, because we don't understand that it wasn't written to us originally. It's written for us, but it wasn't written to us. See, and that's where people get kind of, a little sidetracked, because they first want to jump to what it means for us today before they understand what it meant then. And so I think it's hard. And a lot of people don't want to take the time to learn those things, like learn about the culture gap and learn about the original culture and learn about those things. It's just hard for people. Or granted, I think some of it's laziness. Mm-hmm. That's without saying, but I think for some people it's just a tremendous challenge. It's just like, I don't have time, you know what I mean? Like I'm in today's world, and that stuff is just, what can I have to do with me today? I mean, my dad said to me once, he said, he's 91, by the way, he said, must be hard trying to communicate the Bible to today's world on a college campus. He said, how in the world do you even do it? He said, it must be really challenging. I mean, that was written so long ago to a different people group. I'm like, you're correct. It was written a long time ago to a different people group. So I think it's just hard work. It just takes hard work. And for some people, they have to be, interested and want to do the work. And we have to make it understandable for them and do our work, right? And it's hard work.
I think a couple of things is pretty universal. I think in terms of, like I say, where do they get the wisdom? The sun and the moon and the star, they are not deities. In the ancient world, they are all gods. It doesn't matter what culture you're in. The Bible is so unique. Where do they get that idea that they are not deities? They're just created objects. And then the other thing would be, all the way from ancient Near East to Chinese, the only group of people created in the image of God are the royal and priestly class. Say like in China, the emperor is the son of heaven. All the other people are just slaves. You can lop their head off anytime you want if the emperor doesn't like it. But the Bible is said, even in Genesis, all human beings are created in the image of God. It's almost set up for basic human rights in the beginning.
Right, that's what I was saying at the beginning. Yeah, it's the foundation of human rights, right?
Yeah, but where do you get that from? Nobody believed that.
Right.
It's only in the Bible. Even the Israelites have a hard time believing it.
Right. You know, it seems like the fall in Genesis, the fall of man really matches up with reality in a way that we see something's very wrong with humans in the world. We do some incredibly despicable things. You know, we're like, God, how could anyone do that? But then we seem to be able to do some pretty impressive things, you know, like some really morally, genuine some moral things that are like, wow, that's really, wow, where's that come from? Well, we're creating image and likeness of God. Obviously, we still have his moral imprint. We do amazing things, but then the fall is there and we still do some really horrible things, right? So it seems like the fall in Genesis really matches up with what we see in reality. At least, you know, I think it does. You know, people say, no, it's psychology. You can explain that, or sociology, or they'll say it's something else. Like, you know, that's just from people, the way they're raised. But it's more to it than that.
Well, like I said, the amazing thing is the Bible is the only document say that all human beings are created in the image of God.
Right.
All the rest, the only group of people created in the image are the kings and the priests. The rest are not. So
right.
Have a completely different class. The Bible is like democratized. Everybody is created in the image of God. It's the only scripture you can find in any place, any world religion or world will. You do not have that.
Right. Well, good. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Well, listen, I just want to apologize for Dr. Grotice not being able to make it tonight. He sent me an email on Facebook saying that he had something come up and he wouldn't explain what it was, but it's none of my business, but he couldn't make it. He wanted to reschedule. But I do know for a fact, I know for sure that Craig Blomberg, who actually teaches at the same seminary as Dr. Grotice, he's actually in charge of New Testament studies, will be here next week. Craig Blomberg is a New Testament scholar. Hey, look, wait a minute. Here, I have it right here. Look, I just pulled his book off my shelf. Look right here, The Historical Reliability of the New Testament. Look at that. It's only that thick. Look, Historical Reliability of the New Testament, Craig Blomberg. So I know for a fact that he will be here next week because he as soon as I invited him, he said yes instantly. He really wanted to do this. So I definitely can guarantee that he will be here next week. And if he doesn't show up, then I'm contacting Denver Seminary. I'm asking him, what is up with your professors? Why aren't they coming to my calls? Anyway, so, you know, let's be looking forward to that next week. I'll send out the email. Oh, yeah. So I'll give you my biggest, I can admit this. What's my biggest one? My biggest area. It's actually what I do my dissertation on. So I'll go ahead and tell you. I am more interested more than ever in why God has decided to give us a text. How about that? Isn't that a good dissertation topic? Why did God pick a text to communicate to humanity? We have all these different interpretations, all these disagreements, all these different issues. It seems like, was there another medium God could have used to communicate with us than a text? Now, he's communicated to us without a text. He's communicated to us through creation and through the natural world. We can know some things about God, but we do know that we can't find anything about Jesus and, you know, the bigger picture of history without the text, right? And we need the Bible to get a bigger picture of who God is. I'm not against a text. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just trying to do more research on why he's decided to pick a text. And now you guys have been thinking about that question every day. Admit it. Throughout your Christian life. Admit it. Every single day you've got up and said, well, God, why did you give us a text? Why a text? I can read it every day and find out about you. It can be translated. But it seems like a text. Is there an easier way for you to communicate to humans? Right? You guys have been thinking about that every single day. Admit it.
Right.
What would you have done, Eric?
What's that?
How would you have communicated?
That's what I'm trying to work through right now. I'm trying to see if there's another medium he would have picked.
If God would have made a movie, it would have been a lot easier.
Yeah. Well, a text isn't easy. It hasn't been easy. really, if you study the history of the Bible, it's really taken a lot of work. It still is, and there's a lot of disagreements about the Bible. More than I can even write them. I mean, I could just go on and on, all the interpretive disagreements and everything. So, you know, I just want to say that that's my research project, and that's what I'll be hopefully doing a dissertation on over the next 10 years of my life. So when I finish it, I'll tell you about it. But for now, can't do much about that. All I can do is give you a foretaste. No one's ever thought about that ever, right? In the history of theology and apologetics. That's why you take a class in bibliology in seminary. They just cover it. It's done, right? No, it's not done. It's not that easy. But yeah, so we'll see what I come up with. Anybody else have any major apologetic issues they been wrestling with? Anybody else? Last couple, and we'll wrap it up. Any issues?
I just wanted to add something that's not related to that because
no, you can't.
Right.
Sorry.
Well, I was going to say Ravi Zacharias was really amazing in apologetics, and I've listened to him a lot. But his service is Friday at 11 o'clock, Facebook and YouTube Eastern time. But I did
this
feel
Friday. It's this Friday.
Yeah, it's this Friday.
Okay. Okay.
And it will be recorded apparently. But what I thought was really cool is that I have a friend that she is a believer, but she kind of does things in a way that suits her. And I was sharing her about Ravi, sent her a little video clip on him, and the next thing you know, she's like, "Oh, I've been listening to him all day. He's great." I just thought it was wonderful that I felt like, you know, like I influenced somebody else by listening to someone that's really good at this. So I thought it was really encouraging. Whereas there's other people, this just happened with friends of ours that are Christians. I feel like people, they have that cognitive dissonance that you taught about, where, you know, like even if you want to interject something that you might have learned, they have their own preconceived idea of the way things were. And yesterday's conversation was about Solomon versus David. And it was like, I just realized there was not a receptivity. They weren't receptive. They had their own mind. Their mind already made up about how something was, and they weren't really interested in looking at the text. And so I wasn't prepared for that. I was kind of surprised because I really haven't, you know, had much opportunity. And that this is to a believer, to believers, right? So anyway, I'm just saying I think that it's challenging when people already have their minds made up for whatever reason, and they don't want to go a step further. Like, let's explore this a little further and let's learn more about this. There's more of pushback sometimes, I think.
Well, like I said, in that class which you took, the two biggest issues are the dissonance issue and the what we call, as I said, the confirmation bias. You know, we want to seek out things that already agree with our positions. It's just human nature. It's the way we're wired. We do that with politics. We do it with religion. We do it with everything. I mean, all other religions do it too. It doesn't mean we can't come to any true beliefs. It doesn't mean that we can't have any objectivity. But you're right. I mean, when we dialogue with different people from different faith backgrounds, Muslims, atheists, Jewish people, I mean, you know, you really got to listen to them, what they're saying, and hear them out. But in the back of your mind, you're thinking, I really just know I don't believe this. Like, I know I don't believe the Quran's a revelation from God. I just don't accept that. You know what I mean? But then you're trying to be courteous and hear them out why they believe that. You know what I mean? And trying to be kind, you know, but it's just very hard for people to change, to kind of alter, you know, their positions and things. You know what I mean? But people do switch views sometimes, belief systems. Ravi left Hinduism, right, for Christianity, you know, and some Jewish people on here, like Vi, left. Vi, when did you come to faith? You were raised Orthodox? What was your Jewish background?
No, Greek Orthodox.
You were raised Greek Orthodox?
Yep.
Oh wait, you weren't. Okay. Weren't you raised Orthodox Judaism? No. Oh, can't hear you. Turn off your mute. Vi, I can't hear you. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah.
There you go. Oh, now you're.
Gary was Jewish, and I'm Greek. We're Romans.
Oh, okay. I thought you were Jewish too. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
We're Romans.
All these years. I thought
Well,
you were raised
no,
Jewish.
we were saved in that. Salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. Literally,
Right. Literally to the Greek. Right. Okay.
Yeah, I became disenchanted with the Greek Orthodox Church, and then I pursued. I just had this hunger for truth. But I went to a Buddhist temple. I went to a synagogue, a Baptist church. I went to all of these. I walked away, and I thought, you know what? Everybody thinks they're right, so I'm not going to I'm not going to think about this anymore.
Right.
And
okay. Well, the point is, though, people do change. I mean, they can change their beliefs and views. It does happen. It just sometimes it's very painful. Painful for them to do that. To say like, "Oh my God, I've been taught this my whole life. This is what I believe," and suddenly I'm realizing this isn't true. And then this is the truth. I mean, it's like it's very hard. And so.
And then who comes into my life? Barry, who tells me that, he's a Messianic Jew. And I said, wow, I've never met one of you before. I went to the college with a lot of Jewish kids. I knew what they, believed. And, I was challenged. I was really challenged. I had never read the word, had never gotten into the word. I was saved through a women's Bible study, actually.
That's great. So you change your positions, you change your views. It can happen.
Right. Having a literature major, I run across scripture, so much in literature. And in this woman's Bible study, I realized, wow, it blew my mind. They really understand what's being said here.
Right.
And it just blew me away. And
yeah, let me kind of finish with this. Some people get interested. Whenever you get interested in apologetics or kind of learning how to defend your faith, Ravi was a good example of somebody who was a popular level apologist. And he was an evangelist, really a great, gifted evangelist. I never viewed Ravi as like, he was a total intellectual too. I mean, the way he spoke, you could see it, but he wasn't really a professor of a university. He didn't teach anywhere. He wasn't like a J.P. Moreland where he taught at a university, and or even Norm Geisler. Ravi was a traveling speaker. He spoke on college campuses, and he was able to weave in philosophy and culture and theology all together into one. And he was a gifted evangelist, definitely a communicator. But when you get interested in just defending your faith, you don't have to be like Ravi or Norm Geisler. You don't have to learn everything. I always say, just learn some of the basics. And that'll take you like further in your conversations you ever could. If you can just learn the basics on how to explain the existence of God, how to defend the resurrection, how to explain why Jesus is unique, why he's the Messiah. That's good enough for most people. Now, the reason I have to do more or learn more is because I'm on a campus. There's just so many areas I have to dip into and have to, just a lot of questions come my way. So, but it just depends. But on basic level, you can just learn some general understanding of apologetics. It can help you a lot. And, so just don't feel overwhelmed or like, oh, I have to learn everything. You'll never be able to learn everything, and never have to be like a Ravi or, some of these big wigs, these guys that do it, all the time. So just want to encourage you in that area. Yeah, well, I don't really have anything else to share. I'm sorry we had to kind of go off. We just kind of did our own thing tonight. I think it turned out okay. I appreciate everybody kind of going along with the flow and not being, like, oh my God, he's not here. What happened? I'm leaving. I'm never coming back. So, I do guarantee that Craig Blomberg will be here next week. And I'm really sorry for what happened with Dr. Groteis. Like I said, I don't really have a lot of answers as far as what specifically happened. It's the first time it has happened. All these calls we've done that happens. So some things are just out of my hands. But does anybody have any specific prayer requests? And I mean, I can pray us out and we can go about our way. Anything? I can't take 100 prayer requests, maybe a few, or anybody specifically. And we'll kind of head out of here for the night. Anybody?
You can keep praying for the Muslims who just finished Ramadan and the ones that, are reading the word or meeting with people.
Okay. Okay, anybody else?
You can pray for my wife. She has
Hello? Lost you there. Who's there? Someone was saying pray for my wife, and then I didn't hear what after that. What was the other part? They're gone.
I think it was
Okay.
Bob Clapper. Bob, are you still there? We lost you, Bob.
He was on mute. Let me unmute him. Bob, are you there? Okay, I don't know what happened. Anyway, anybody else?
Well, I'm graduating soon.
Hey, Eric,
after
that wasn't me.
the end of-
Eric, this is Bob.
Sorry.
That wasn't me.
Okay, I didn't think it was. Okay, I'm sorry. But Charles, go ahead.
I just like discernment of God's will for really like the rest of my working life since I'm graduating after this summer.
You'll be graduating December next year?
No, like in August.
Oh, in August. Okay. How's that? Wait. Okay, I'm confused. How do you
After
graduate?
summer semester.
Oh, summer semester. Okay. I was gonna say that's to throw me off. I'm like, how's that work? I was thinking of like, Tom and Mitchell just graduated. So, okay. Okay, we're praying for that. Anybody else? Anything particular?
Hey, Eric, I just started all the Ratio Christi onboarding stuff with the fundraising university and all that other stuff. So
That's challenging.
yeah, and on top of that, we're trying to move to Houston and get another house ready. I'm the administrator over my dad's estate, so I'm trying to get my childhood home ready to sell and all kinds of crazy stuff. So just appreciate clarity and God's grace to it all.
Okay. Anybody else? Maybe one more? Anybody? Has anybody seen any major changes from the virus, like talking to people, like evangelistically? Anything new? Any other good conversations? Anybody? Anything new? Just same old kind of? No, I guess not.
Well, I can chime in on that. I mean, we do a lot of online ministry through our church, and I started a ministry page since I'm leaving the church and joining RC. And we've reached a lot of people worldwide through online ministry stuff. And it's been really cool to see them message and asking for prayer and counsel on things. We've seen kids get back into church. So, I mean, for us, this has been kind of a blessing in disguise in some ways. It's been kind of crazy to see how God's used the online stuff. So, and I got to meet you guys and start doing this. That's been a blessing, man.
Great.
Really has.
Well, we've got two really good New Testament scholars coming up. We've got Craig Blomberg and Darrell Bock in the month of June. I don't know if you know who either one of them are, but they're two of the best ones we have. So hope you don't. I'm looking for more books. Oh, there's one right there. There it is. Look, I found Darrell Bock's book right here. Here, The Missing Gospels. There it is right there. So he has a lot more books than that. Oh, there's another one. Anyway, there's one here called Studying Historical Jesus. There's Darrell Bock. But anyway, so we've got those two guys coming on. Okay, well, I guess I'll just pray and kind of wrap it up. But once again, thank you for everybody for just kind of hanging in there and going with the flow tonight and not, being upset about the change. It's just one of those things that are out of our hands. So that's Zoom for you, right? Some things you can't control there. Okay, well, let's go ahead and pray and we'll go from there. Lord, we just want to thank you for this time and thank you for those that have participated tonight.